the last year of my dancing was a new level because I realized how egotistical you have to be as a ballet dancer. I got to the point where I was like, I don't care what these kids do. I don't care what these adults do. Like, I'm watching people, these young kids who are comparing themselves to others, comparing their bodies, comparing, like, stressed out that they won't become professional dancers, and that's going to be the end of their lives if they don't get this job. And then watching like adults who are professionals like stress out because they can't get a step right. I'm like, at the end of the day, yeah, this doesn't serve me. Which that is like a death in itself, like something that like saved me from my youth. Ended up being the thing where I'm like, it's not who I am anymore.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. We are your hosts, Bryce III, he, him pronouns, and, oh no, Liz is not here to say Liz McKean, she, her pronouns, because she's not here this episode, which is a first for this podcast, and it is interesting. I feel like I got jumped off podcasting solo, but now I've gotten so used to Liz being here and her energy weighing down my energy in the best possible supporting way that it's like, whoa, I'm naked today. So Liz, once you listen to this, I want you to know I do miss you, my friend, and I hope you're holding it down in that meeting that you're in that you couldn't be here for this recording for. But I am super duper excited to have this conversation today. Before we get into this conversation, please head over to your distribution platform where you get your podcast from, wherever that is, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go rate and review this podcast. Go subscribe to make sure you get a steady flow of these new episodes so you can tap into the best podcast for recovery and storytelling. And take a second and do that now. We'll let you. We'll pass the plate around so you can go do that. And so today we have my good friend Eugene Barnes. Eugene Barnes is a Baltimore City native, a person in long-term recovery, and a volunteer coordinator for the Phoenix-DFW. Having been a professional ballet dancer for 18 years, Eugene started his ballet career in 2004 at the age of 18. And you know what? I'm going to stop the bio right there because it sounds super robotic, me doing it. And I'm just excited to hear your story from your point of view. So Eugene, my friend, how are you today?
I'm good. Actually, I am Eugene III as well.
Oh, it is a suffix party in here today. 2/3 on the call. Yeah, I seen that in your email tag. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring that up. But you brought it up before I did.
Yeah. Well, you said Bryce the Third. I'm like, maybe. But you have one syllable. Eugene the Third doesn't have the same ring.
It does kind of. You got one extra syllable, but that's cool. But yeah, so how's your energy?
It's Thursday. Is it Thursday? It's Thursday. I don't know. It's all over the place. I was in a meeting and I was like, we have like 5 more months left of the year. I was like, oh no, it's August. So yeah, I'm caffeinated.
Oh yeah, turn up. Mm-hmm. Turn up. Me too. I got me a nice little nitro cold brew in my body. I'm ready to go. I did my morning and work day startup routine that I'm working to implement into my life, which allows for me to orient into the day chronologically. So
what do you do?
So I look at my goals. So my year is split up in quarters. So I have like my annual goals, but then I have my goals within a quarter. So like I look at my annual goals, I look at my quarterly goals. I look at my rolling calendar, which is like everything for it's like a year at a glance that allows me to see like what dates I'm where, what I'm doing, what I'm focused on, what the project focus is. Then I get into the month, which like allows me to get a little bit more micro. Then I look at the week, and then I look at the day. And that has helped to orient me because I don't really like perceive time. Like some people say, like some people could tell you, yeah, back in 96, I did this and this. Like I don't even know what day it is sometimes. So I got to remind myself.
I mean, I could do that in retrospect. I mean, just today, and so I don't know what state I'm in. I don't, I mean, there's a lot. No, it's funny. My morning routine usually stems in like body scans, but it's because of my former career. And I always have to exercise in the morning, like always.
That has been a new development for me. Historically, I'm not that big on physical like exercise for
Really?
exercise sake. Yeah, I just
think
don't.
That's a shocker.
I just am not. Like I like stuff like rock climbing or like biking or like stuff that's fun, but doesn't like I'm not here to work out. Like I'm here to have fun, and then the result is I got to work out because I had to like move physically. And then I'm an artist too, and so like my craft involves like there's a physical nature to it, which I'm sure as we continue our conversation, the audience will learn that you can relate to heavily. But it's like when I move, there's a way that I convey. We speak to the audience not only through our words, but through our bodies. So I like to be able to feel like I have command in relationship with my body. And that's become a part of my craft and a part of my recovery. And so doing fun stuff that allows for me to be able to do that like has been major. But like just recently starting a day and doing something that I just don't want to do. Like I don't want to like I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do this high intensity workout.
I run. That's like, it's been like the greatest meditation for me. Like I actually started running during the pandemic. So like everyone was either doing sourdough, I started running. It was actually like a supplement because I used to smoke cigarettes. And so in order to stop, I had to supplement something else. And I ended up running like my first marathon in 2020. Like it was, yeah. So I just like keep it,
Wait,
nice
so you were still smoking? You were still smoking in 2020?
Yeah, I stopped in May 7th, 2020.
Okay.
And then
immediately you started running to supplement.
Well, no, I started running before I stopped.
Okay.
And it was insane because it was insane that I would do it and I would be like, oh, I'm running. And I was like, man, I can't wait to have a cigarette afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I was in like that like bout of insanity. And then my sponsor was like, you know how to stop. And that kind of was just like, oh, you got me. I do. And so once I stopped, it was crazy. Like I was struggling with 4 miles. I stopped. 2 days later, I ran 7. No problem, no stop. And so I've just been,
how long did you smoke for?
Now you make me do math.
Back in 96, I was.
No, not in 96. Oh my gosh. I was like, that was 10. No, so I started probably around the same time I started like drinking and partying. So 20 here the 2. I was probably like about 14 years. And then, yeah, well, yeah, it was like a good 14 years. It was actually I would smoke when I would drink, but then when I went to rehab, I started smoking more. So it like elevated. And then, yeah, I'm grateful for the pandemic because actually it had me like stop and like really reflect what I was doing. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame smoking. And so that and my sponsor calling me out was just like, let's stop.
Yeah, shout out to the rehab smoking sections though. I don't even know the rehab I went to. Yeah. The one I went to, they didn't, like, it was like a year or two after I went, they got rid of, it was no smoking on campus. And I don't know if I would have, like, hung in there like that, because that was a real big space of, like, connectivity and early community. Like, I would go there, I'll smoke my cigarette and was
Yeah.
on and popping.
Well, I actually, I went to a treatment center in Michigan, actually, in
Oh, did
Manistee,
you?
Michigan. Yeah, so
Okay.
I lived in Michigan for 2-ish years, almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's crazy actually. Like, but yeah, no, I am very glad that I don't smoke and I do run now. It is hard because it is August and we're in the thick of heat in
Mm.
Texas. So running at 7:30, which is the coolest time, is like 85 to 88. So, just get a good sweat, come back and
Yeah.
work.
That sweat is important. I want to zoom out too, just still on that cigarette thing, where it's like the phenomena of like change, and there could be ways that we don't even desire to change, but because of what it takes to maintain even the pieces of change that we've had, like we have to look at like how do these things align. I had the exact same situation where I had been sober for about a year. I got sober in 2013 and quit cigarettes December 2014. And I was going and I was hitting the bag in the gym with my friends. And I would get out of the gym and I would be in a parking lot like, ooh, that was a good workout. And I, like me a Newport. And then one
Got
day
that
it
at
just,
Newport.
oh yeah, the port shorts, baby. But yeah, one day it just struck me like this doesn't align.
Mm-hmm.
This no longer is a part of my journey, and I have to, like, it's that conflict between who it is that I used to be and what it is that I'm becoming. And I think like once we start to embrace new life, once we start to dig into recovery, or we start to do research on who it is that we're becoming, some of those old things just fall off like apples from a tree, And like your sponsor told you, like, you know how to do this.
You got to
You know
do
how
it.
to do this. Yeah.
Actually, it's fascinating that, especially with cigarettes and like letting it go. So it was like 4 years. It was about 4 years from the time that I stopped drinking and using drugs to when I stopped smoking. And I think a lot of it had to do with the influence of other people, especially because I was still dancing at the time. So that, like, you're going to stop smoking, you're going to get fat, like you're going to like, and
Mm,
so like it played with me. And it's interesting because I actually had to get to a point with like, what would my life look like without it? Like, how will my body perform without it? And so
mm,
a lot of it, especially like as like that part of my life ended, a lot of my life started to change in the way that like even how I looked at ballet shifted, because it was no longer like other people's ideals or like what they would say. It was more of like how I would feel. And now it's like it's fascinating because feel more I feel more like myself, which is an odd thing to say, but than I have ever. Like I am very sure. I still get that like pit in my stomach where I'm like trying to lean into intuition, and I'm like, is this
mm,
right? Like I know best. And then I also like pair it with like, you know what? At least I tried. So even if it
mm,
isn't what the desired outcome is, I at least know that like regardless of what I thought it would be, like I'm gonna find an answer that's gonna always be better.
mm,
And so it's helped me. Like I mean, granted, I'm not going to minimize me stop drinking and doing drugs because yes, but like I think stopping so late, stopping cigarettes was like really seeing like the power of addiction,
mm,
especially where there was like no consequences. Like I wasn't having health issues. My doctor
mm.
still wasn't telling me to like, like, oh, maybe you shouldn't. Like it was a decision that I made that I was like, oh, I get it. Like I see the power of it.
Mm. Uh, yeah, I think a lot of us have the experience of being in a space of desperation when we first enter into recovery or we first quit, using alcohol and drugs. And I've learned in my own personal experience that there's some things that I wanted to embrace that I didn't want to be in despair before, like I took that first step, and that's where I kind of like learned to lean into my own power and to my willingness to step into a new life and something that I desire to create without like, get my ass beat, because that's how I got here
Yeah.
into recovery.
Well, it's fascinating. Like I've heard this before, like in my meetings. Like the longer you go, or this was someone in their experience, but the longer they went in to their recovery, the shorter their tolerance was for stuff.
Mm,
And so I started
yeah.
to realize that in so many facets, like more along the lines of relationships with people, like a lot of the things that I would just take on, like people's opinions, people's thoughts, people's stares. Like it was like it doesn't serve me anymore, and so
Mm,
like that tolerance to try to be desirable in someone else's eyes shifted, and it's like so liberating.
mm,
It's
yeah,
like so
no,
freeing.
I definitely can relate. And for me, it's a practice. Like I
Absolutely.
gotta, I gotta show up on a daily basis. Some days it's a little tougher than others, but yeah, no, definitely leaning into really that autonomy, that
Hmm.
self advocacy, being able to have a conversation with myself and what it is that I need. So I'm super curious about your relationship with dance. Were you dancing before you quit drugs and alcohol?
So I started dancing in Baltimore. I grew up. I'm a preacher's kid, a pastor's kid actually. My mom and my dad are both pastors. My grandmother was a really respected preacher in Baltimore. Shout out to the AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal, if you don't know. My dad is a musician. My sister actually composes operas, and she's
Mm,
had like recently this year, she's had two. She had a half an evening at Carnegie Hall this year.
wow.
And then she's like music at Kennedy Center. Shout out to Jasmine Barnes. Like, listen to her music. She's gifted, like, beyond. But so music has always been a big part of my life. My mom was a dancer. Um, and I started dancing at 11, partially because I watched, like, crazy enough, actress Brisha Webb went to my elementary, middle, and high school.
Mhm.
And so she was performing with a bunch of other girls this song Black Butterfly. And it was just like everyone's dancing. And I remember leaving thinking I could do it better. And never stepping foot in it, but I was like, I could do that better. And so I started dancing through like the Dunham technique for like a liturgical dance company. And then I went to the Baltimore School for the Arts Twigs program where I like just loved it. Like I just that was actually like the first time in my life because I was teased miserably, and that was the first time like finding ballet and kind of blocking out the noise. And
Mhm.
I just knew that was for me. I went to the high school, Baltimore School for the Arts, and I actually got offered my first contract when I was 17. So it was September of my senior year, and I was just like, well, my mom was like, you need to get your, you need to finish school. So I did that. And then I went right into a professional ballet company at 18. Again, like the first year, I really was still like, I was still going to church. I actually had my first drink there. I also had my first like hangover when I was 18 and I did not vibe with it. I did not like it. Like it wasn't, but I also like, I went in as an apprentice. I was promoted halfway through the year to like the next rank core member. Like I was the first American for that company. And so like I was experienced like this world. And then like the next year, 19, like all the kids from New York came and like those kids were like cool and I still was not cool. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be cool. And so like I did this like balance of like focusing on career and trying to be like desirable, as I said, in others' eyes. And then like eventually probably around 21 was like the first time that I like was like introduced to like my drug of choice. And like then I really was just like, I don't care about the ballet. The world is out there. Everyone loves me. And yeah, like I really had that like balance. It's not a balance. I was going back and forth of like, do you know, this is so random. Do you know Helen Baylor's song, The Testimony? There's on TikTok, there's that like lines like, and I hit, my head hit the wall, bang. But it's like in this, like as a child, this song is this woman who, Helen Baylor, who grew up in the church, and she always said like, but I had a praying grandmother. And I remember as a child, I was like, that story is fascinating. Like, and I knew that that was going to be my story, and it was my story. But anyway, yeah, I started using heavily, and that my first like 10 years at the ballet company. And it was interesting because everyone enabled it. Everyone, like the people who I like, the drug dealers, like everyone was like buffering me. So I, of course, didn't feel consequences. And then around 2014, I was confronted by my boss, and I was just like, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna get you before you get me. Like, I don't want to stop. I don't have a problem. So I quit, and then found out that like I had no real skill trade other than twirling. And so I left. I moved to Dallas. My family at the time relocated from Baltimore and moved to the Dallas area. And so I like found my way in like corporate sales, ended up like getting promoted to like manager, which was weird. Again, with like no skill set, but kind of like could understand the game. But like I started like, I think that's when it really took off. And I was freelancing at the same time, but it took off in a world where there were no, like the bumpers were off. So I started feeling consequences. And when I actually first got clean, so when I went to treatment, I honestly thought ballet was my, like, that was my Achilles heel. That was the reason why I started like doing drugs and drinking. Like it was ballet. And I learned very quickly that that was like my passion. Like I was away from it for a year. And I was in Michigan. And it was like in Grand Rapids, and I started taking adult classes and with Grand Rapids Ballet. And one of my favorite ballerinas ever, Patricia Barker, who was the director at the time, walked by me and was like, "You're not a normal person." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "You're not a normal person. Like, you're not a normal adult." I was like, "Okay." What am I? And so she was just like, I want you to take company class. And so I took the company class, and that started my career, like without drugs. And that was like scary just because like, I'm not saying that I like drank or used while I was performing, but like I was definitely like hungover and still drunk from the night before.
Yeah.
And so like learning what my body is, learning what, like who I am as an artist without like the cloud, was fascinating. And then like I just retired last year in May, and like the last year of my dancing was a new level because I realized how egotistical you have to be as a ballet dancer. Even if like, I mean, I was teaching, I was a director of training for this ballet company in Dallas. And I got to the point where I was like, I don't care what these kids do. I don't care what these adults do. Like, I'm watching people, these young kids who are comparing themselves to others, comparing, their bodies, comparing, like, stressed out that they won't become professional dancers, and that's going to be the end of their lives if they don't get this job. And then watching like adults who are professionals like stress out because they can't get a step right. I'm like, at the end of the day, who cares? So I was just like, yeah, this doesn't serve me. Which that is like a death in itself, like something that like saved me from my youth. Ended up being the thing where I'm like, it's not who I am anymore. I mean, I still love it. I love ballet. I love it. I still watch it. I'm like, I think I will be in Chicago next year because New York City Ballet will be performing in Chicago. They're touring. And I love Chicago. I don't really care for New York. Sorry out there. Truth. But like, I love it. I love ballet. I just don't want to be that vessel on stage anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's so many pieces of your story. Is there a culture of, so how you say you were shielded and you had like the bumpers up and you didn't feel the consequences? Is there a culture of, I know you say comparison, in a lot of rooms where there's comparison, there can be substances. Is there a culture of substance within the dance community?
I'll say yes. I mean, historically, like if you think of like the 70s and 80s, like the heyday of ballet, like many of those dancers were in like Studio 54. Like many of those dancers, like Kelsey Kirkland, like is like notoriously known as being this like prodigy of a dancer, but also plagued with like allegations and truths around drugs.
Yeah.
And so like, I mean, like, do I think that I would have found drugs and alcohol if I went the collegiate route? Probably. I mean, I think that there was a perfect storm of me getting away from my family. I mean, my dad's also in recovery. So like my comparison to my dad that like he did it wrong and I could do it better. The fame, because like uniquely, like for the most part, like I experienced a lot of first for that company and for myself. So when I was dancing for this ballet company, Carolina Ballet, I was the first Black Cavalier. I was the first I was the first Black Prince in Cinderella. I had a like tremendous rep. Like, and I actually like went into the ballet company with a dancer who was Black at the time, who said, "You will never get these roles because you're Black." And I ended up getting everything and more. But at the same time, like I would compare myself to, like, I mean, ballet is very Eurocentric. So I would compare myself physically to those who were, of like European descent. So it was like, when the thing that was crazy was like the reason why I was getting all of these things was because of like my skill, my ability, the way I thought about ballet, the way I approached it. Of course, hindsight is 2020. I think about it. Like I look at a lot of dancers now, and there's still this whole. I mean, there's that culture of like of drinking. There's the culture of. I don't think it's as bad now. I think everyone's more health conscious now. I mean, but I don't know. I'm not in the game.
Yeah.
I'm in both games.
And then when we thinking about like comparison too, because I know you've heard the phrase "comparison is the thief of joy," but when we talk about a craft, I think depending on our intention with the craft, I think, and if we speak about recovery, at least from what I've learned, is that sometimes these phrases, "comparison is the thief of joy," can have this absolute, like, don't compare at all because you're gonna steal joy from yourself. And it's like, sometimes like looking and seeing and developing reference points allows for me to show up for my craft in a way that is representative of the level that I want to take it to and pays homage to those that inspire me because I'm able to see them, see what they do. And I have the experience of being in the craft and, hearing something or seeing something. I'm like, yo, this person's getting a lot of attention, or this person has built, a brand or has built some recognition, and I could do it better.
Oh, no. But I mean, I've always had that. As a child, I said that. Like, I was like, I can do that better.
Yeah.
The thing is, so it's like interesting when I talk to my sister about it, like we're in two different art forms. But we respect it so much. Like, and so we start talking about, there was one role in particular, and it was this ballet called Symposium. And it's actually my favorite work that I've ever performed. The music was Leonard Bernstein. It's like super jazzy, like, and honestly, it's like that's the work that's how I would always want to dance. Like that choreography was really incredible. Robert Wise, shout out to you. And it was just like, that's how I want to move. And I remember in this moment, I got to perform that role several times, and generally there's like seniority, but this kid ended up getting like the first cast of it. And like that spiraled me. Like that was like one of those moments where like I couldn't look at it like, you know what, you have the opportunity of performing this again. But it was just like, like it was like my mission in the moment to like point out how bad the person was doing it. And so like, and there's like facets of that, but then I can always root that back to like, I was really insecure in myself, like really thick in my using, not really feeling secure, like financially, just because we were broke as ballet dancers. Really, around that time, I was 26. I was like dealing with injuries at the time. Also, like, it was just wild. It was like, I really started getting that thought, like, oh my goodness, I'm pushing 30. Like, what am I going to do like after like 30? So I'm like dealing with all this stuff. But I think what's interesting about, like, you were mentioning, like, comparisons, think of joy, all those recovery things, if you spot it, you got it. Like, like, I think of all that stuff, but I like that, like, I don't know. It's fascinating. I think now, like, working alone, basically. I mean, I work in my second bedroom now office, and I choose not to compare myself to anyone. Like, I honestly, like, working wise, I choose not to. Like, it's kind of been like this social experiment for myself to like with work, like not to compare myself to others. Like, I can honestly, if you ask me, I don't know how anyone else is performing, because it's like I work for a Metroplex, and we have our own differences geographically. I mean, even within the Metroplex, there's differences. Like, there's so much to be focused on. Then we focus on I don't know, Kenny G over there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, and I know we're bouncing around, but I'm curious, like, what inspired the trip to rehab? Like, when it's like, okay, I gotta go figure something else out. Like, what was the inspiration behind that move?
My promotion. I worked as a shoe and suit like consultant. I hated it because it was commission. I walked in with my name badge and said I quit. This was like a month into the job. They promoted me to a supervisor of children's.
You walked in and said I quit, and they promoted you?
Yeah.
What?
I was good. I am good at what I do. Like, it doesn't matter. Like,
Doesn't
if
matter
I'm
what
in
it
the
is.
space, I am good at it. And so they promoted me. The general manager said, "We see a lot in you." Like, I guess I was watched in that process. And so they put me over. I remember this distinctly. So he walked me to this area, children's intimate apparel, and it was a mess. Everything about it was a mess. Like, and he like walked me, and I felt like it was like Simba and Mufasa. Like, this is your
Everything with light
land,
shine glowing and
right?
glowing.
And I'm like looking at the intimate apparel area. I'm like, what about the shadowy area? He's like, especially that. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And during that time, like, again, very successful. Like, became number one salesperson in the state of Texas. Like, I was just very successful. Like, that was when I started to learn like Dallas. I really wanted to be like popular. I wanted to recreate what I had in Raleigh. And so really went deep. And I actually missed like almost a week of work. And then like a couple of weeks later, I got promoted. And that was like that realization that like, and I was like promoted to like the business jewelry manager. And so like in my mind, like, because I wasn't honest, I wasn't like trustworthy, I wasn't reliable, I kind of took it as like, oh my goodness, they're going to like, I'm being exposed. And so I went out for one last hurrah and then like ended up like taking a lift to my mother's place. It's like 3 a.m. And I opened the door and she was standing there and I like saw myself. Like her, it was her, but I saw myself through her. And that my mom was the first person who honestly confronted me. Like, not in a way that was, it was like she confronted me with love, like not in a judgmental way, like, oh, you have a problem. We think you have a problem, like tiptoeing around it. I don't remember what she said, but it was the first time I like was honest, I needed help. And yeah, I mean, again, like none of us knew, and I wasn't really talking to my dad at the time, so I definitely wasn't telling him I had a problem. But like, I was like navigating, so I called insurance, and like they like walked me through it, and I ended up getting a flight to Manistee, and I ended up I stayed there for like 93 days. Yeah, I ended up working at the treatment center too.
Nice. And then after that, like did your approach to the craft, did your approach to showing up and being good in spaces, did your approach to comparison, did any of that approach shift?
It shifted in treatment. I mean, because even in that moment, what I realized was that like I still do. I have the ability to adapt in spaces a lot easier than most. So like I went into treatment with the intention of being like the best rehabber known to man. And so like, and it doesn't serve you. Like, it does not serve you. And like, there were several moments in that treatment center that I realized I had a problem. Like, I realized it. And then it actually like flipped. So I realized I had a problem, but then I also realized there were areas that I needed to heal myself. And so because of that, like I created like the first LGBTQ track, like afternoon, like evening track, like of just pure run. And so like that was healing myself, hearing other stories of other people. Because even in that moment, like, I mean, I come from a family of love. Like I'm a preacher's kid who loved me and loved my partner. You know, like I've experienced things that are not quote unquote the norm.
Yeah.
And so like but I still had that internalized like hatred. Like there was so much I had to like work out. And so then I started helping people, people who were trying to leave treatment. And like at this time, I'm like, this is great. Like you get free food, you get to go to the gym, like, there's no like real responsibilities, like, and so I would like start helping people who were trying to leave. And so like if they wanted to leave because they didn't have certain things, I would go, and I had a relationship with Store Becky, and I'd be like, hey, Store Becky, they're going to leave. Can you help them out? Yes. What do you need? And she would give them. When I was about to track out, my aftercare specialist was a disaster. And so I started to create my own plan, and I was very vocal about it. And so this is wild. It's still wild. I started drafting people's aftercare plans from the smoke shack, treatment center. Like wild, like that level of delusion is wild. But it was like I ended up getting a job as an aftercare specialist at the treatment center.
Mm.
And I learned a lot. So I knew, like, my comparison was like more, I'll say this. It was more of like, I can do that better and I can do it more efficient. And so instead of like saying that in a gossipy manner, like it started being like, I can do that better. And here's the evidence. Here are the solutions. And so that came, I mean, of course, like a pendulum, like it went very like into like the realm of self-righteousness. And then it started to like, I think now I'm starting to get back into a space where I'm like, you don't know all the answers. You have to start letting people in. You have to start like allowing people to contribute to your gifts.
Yeah.
And so it's the opposite of ballet. Ballet is like you let people in on condition. So like you have your favorite coach, you have your favorite choreographers. And so this is like allowing people from all walks of life to contribute something where I'm like, okay, I can see that.
No, yeah, I think such is recovery, such is this process of allowing life to teach us. And when the pendulum swings, we learn to swing with it. And I think both are like, and also in outside of the realm of black and white, I think all of that is important, Eugene. Like I listen to your story and I hear a person who takes initiative, and not only takes initiative, but when they step into a space, they are going to be a top performer. Like, and it sounds like there's intention, of course, but for me, what it really sounds like is this is just your reality. Like, yeah, I'm just good at things. Like, and if I step into the space, like I'm going to contribute in this way, that's going to be the level of contribution that I see that should be contributed here.
Well,
And
what's fascinating about that? That has taken me the most time, because there's this facet of thinking of like humility as this like self-deprecating, just subservient behavior. And my sponsor and I were working on the concept of humility of just being like not greater than, not equal than. Not greater than, not lesser than. And I really had to get to a space of seeing my gifts as like given to me from from God. Like it was definitely like, because there's facets of things where I can get into spaces like, how did you not see that? Like it's clear. Like it's clear. And so I've learned that okay, just because others can't see it doesn't mean that it's wrong. I said, what will make it wrong is if I don't speak up about it. So regardless of what it is. And so I think that, it's interesting because I think as a whole, like when I think of the Phoenix, like I didn't come into the Phoenix as like a volunteer. I actually found out about the Phoenix through a Google search. And even the little knowledge I was getting through the interviewing process, I was like, this is for me. And then as I started to experience the Phoenix as a member, I was like, oh, I get it. Like I get it. And I get it for myself, where my abilities for certain things, my abilities to connect with people, my ability to see solutions in numbers, like through metrics, my experience of all of the like working for Macy's, and the lessons I learned there, working for Banana Republic, working like running a corporate 7-Eleven. Like I've experienced things working as an aftercare specialist, ballet dancer, ballet teacher. All of these things has like morphed me into who I am. And then looking at my story as a whole, like being plucked out of a random masterclass. Like I was offered a contract not at an audition. It was just a standard ballet class. And the director was like, I want you. Like not even checking. I mean, most ballet companies, they know what their budget is. And he was like, I want you. And like that is like, when I look back at things, I'm like, okay, you can't deny it. Like why would you deny it? That you have abilities, you have gifts. And I think everyone does. I think everyone has their gifts. And I'm just very fortunate to have a family that really like pumps up this delusion. They're like, you can do it. You're number one. And I'm like, yes, I am. And we're all like that. I mean, my mom's like that with my sister. Like we all have this, we know that we have gifts, and it's encouraged that we share it.
And those of y'all listening, Eugene and I encourage you that you share your gifts. And I feel like there has to be a bit of delusion in visionary, because there's a bit of seeing what doesn't exist yet. And some people call that delusional. I call it being visionary. But yeah, I think that's the perfect point. Eugene, I can sit here and talk to you all day, man. Before we go, I do want to ask you a question. If you could go back in time and give a piece of advice or some words to any version of Eugene from the past, what version of Eugene would you pick, and what words would you give him?
I don't know. There's so many facets of Eugene. I think the most recent, like last year, I have to say this because I mean transparency. Like I was fired from the ballet career, the last one, which forced me into my retirement. And what's crazy about it, out of all the stuff I did in my past, while I was just out there wilding, like I was fired. I was fired like clean. Like it's still like mind boggling. But one of the things that, and I remind myself this often, is to love myself. So it's that version of Eugene. So like a year ago, to continue to love myself with that same energy that I used to seek approval from others with. Because I really, it's one of those things now where I'm in this situation, right? Maybe I'm out of it. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. I was having this conversation with my mom where I was like, I'm going to stop saying that I don't care, because I do. Like I care about a lot of things to my detriment sometimes. And whenever I put myself in that space where I remind myself to love myself, like really just love, I realize that I have to let go of a lot. And so like same thing with like drugs, like loving I would not put drugs in my body because I love myself. So why would I hold on to things, people, places that cause emotional harm to me, mental harm to me, spiritual harm to me? And so when I approach my own self with that love, like it's amazing that level of acceptance and surrender that I get to. So
beautiful. Yeah, that's like I said, we could talk for like another hour, because I'd be interested to dig into how that played out, like the leaving the dance company, but in sobriety, and how you showed up for yourself. But I think it could be summed up in those words that you gave yourself today. And I think that level of self-compassion, showing up for ourselves, supporting ourselves, sitting in life as it is, as we are today, and allowing for life to massage the best out of us, that is the biggest tools that we can use to be able to show up for ourselves in this moment. And so thank you for sharing that. Eugene, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live family. And is there anywhere that people can find you? We'll put anything in the description of the podcast. If it's not that big of a deal, I've seen in the form you sent over, you're not big on social media, but I give you this opportunity to share.
I mean, if you want to follow me at Eugene_Clifford, I'm there. I'm only on Instagram. I am not on Facebook. I got rid of Facebook. I quit Facebook in 2017. Yeah, I'm there. I post occasionally. I think my next post should be like another month. So get in it so you can see it. I do have stories of my dog Barry.
We love dog stories. We love dog stories. All right. Well, once again, thank you for showing up, and thank you all for listening. I will put it in here again. Go rate, review the show. That's how we continue to get pushed out to more people. More people need to hear these stories. Somebody specifically needs to hear Eugene's story. And so share this episode with somebody who you know that this story can resonate with. And we will catch you next time on the Rise, Recover, Live podcast.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.